Yeah, I do. Morning! A lot of introductions and high expectations, so I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. I just really want to thank ISCA for being here. We've had a lot of thank yous so far, but our board has been fabulous. Sherry has put together a great conference. But really, this day is about you! And I'm so excited that you're here. I've talked to Dr. Rick Shaw, who I know is here. We were chatting about how many conferences we've been to. And I was thinking about the ones that have meant the most to me. And the ones that have meant the most to me have been the ones that I have met people and I've remembered who they are. Not only that, but we've talked after the conference. And there are many people in this room who I've relied upon from time to time and talked to after the conference. So, to model this, we're going to accomplish a couple things here. You're going to meet a couple people you don't know. But it's not just the normal, oh, hi, I'm Vince, and I'm from Downers Grove South, whatever. You have to meet two people you don't know, where they are, where they're in school, where they're from, just... And you have to remember it. So you have to rehearse in your mind, oh, that was Jim from Brookfield, and I think he works at a junior high. Because later on today, I want you to find them again and say, hey, I remember you. Because then when you leave the conference, you'll have two new people to call upon. Everybody understand the directions? There's one more direction. When you sit back down, move over all the way to the middle so we have some seats on the outside. So we get real comfy. Two directions. Two names, scrunch into the middle. Ready? You get 2 minutes. Go. All right, we're back. So it's one thing to meet somebody, it's another thing to say their name to yourself and where they're from. So here's the third way to remember. You ready? In your mind, we're just going to do this in our heads. Say the name again in your head, where they're from, what they look like. If you only get one person, that's pretty good. You remember both, bonus points. Ready? Okay. So, later on today, let me know how it goes. Seek those people out and make sure you remember their name and where they're from. They will become your colleagues. I do that because we're a small profession. There's not many school counselors. And I've been a school counselor, almost 20 years. And been in ISCA for almost 20 years. And I've seen people come and go. But it really is the professional relationships I have in this organization that have made my work so meaningful. And so if you're new to the profession, welcome. If you're a grad student almost ready to graduate, congratulations. If you've been a counselor for a while, wonderful. Looking forward to meeting you. If you're a professor, we're so happy you're here. Because you're the ones that mold all of us into being great counselors. So I thought, preparing for the speech today, counseling through the mandates, I wasn't quite sure how that was going to look. I thought it might be helpful to share with you some thoughts that I have when mandates happen. When I get called into the principal's office, and the principal says, Vince, we got to make this happen. Or maybe you get called into a meeting with colleagues, and there's been a directive from the school board. We've got to make this happen, and it's unfunded. So figure it out. And what that feeling is for me, I'm sure is for you, is a feeling that we share. So the first piece that I try to think of is I ground myself in where I am. Sherry mentioned that I started my career as a music teacher. And I taught in Addison, elementary music, truly the best job that I ever had. I got to sing and dance with 7-year-olds all day long. Best job I ever had. In the school that I started in, they had a class, what we would call multi-needs now, but it was cross-categorical then, but some students with some very severe learning needs, emotional needs, and they were 6, 7, 8-year-olds. And there was one young boy in the class, and his name was Joey. And Joey would come to class, I had him for two times a week for music, and he would come into my music class, and he would sit down kind of in the first row, kind of over here, as I remember. But Joey never said anything. Joey would just stare off into space. He wasn't disruptive or anything. He just sat. I found out from his teacher, much to her dismay, that after music class, Joey would go back to his class and sing all the songs. Over and over again for the rest of the day. But he never sang in class, nor had he ever said anything to me either. So it was my first year teaching, and I had been hired under kind of some questionable reasons, problem with the other music teacher. The principal actually called me into his office and said, "You're kind of here on a probationary contract." And I hadn't done anything, but my nerves were a little bit high that first semester, and we came to the winter sing. And he said it like, the winter sing, as if we were going to perform in Carnegie Hall. So I was ready for the winter sing. All my classes knew their songs. And the week before, he said, well, there's a few more people that come to this concert. There's your students, obviously, the parents, school board members come to the winter sing. The administrators each go to each other's buildings for the winter sing. This was a big cultural event in this district that I was just beginning to learn about. And he said, you need to think of this winter sing as your audition. Wow. Okay. So we get to the night of the winter sing. I truly didn't think Joey was going to come. I had never met Joey's parents. But there he was in the audience with his class. He had a tie on. It comes time for Joey's class to sing. And they walk up on the risers. And I kind of anticipated Joey would just kind of stare off into space. So I got behind the piano, we're ready to start, and Joey's hand goes up. And he leans over across the risers, and he says, Mr. Rock! Mr. Rock! Well, first I was shocked that he said something. Kids never talked to me before. So in that moment, with everyone watching, it was a gut check. Had to figure out why I was there and what I was going to do. So I decided to walk around the piano, and I went up to Joey. I said, Joey, what can I do for you? And Joey says, pretty much for the whole gym to hear, why are we here? Caused me to pause. I didn't know. I had to think about it. There's been so much pressure to perform at this. My first thought was, well, I'm here to save my job. Didn't want to say that. Or I'm there to please parents, or to please the school board, or to please my principal. Didn't want to say that either. But then after I paused, and I did pause, I knew why I was there. I started to make music with kids. So I leaned over to Joey and said, Joey, we're here to sing songs. And he went, oh, okay. And then he stared off into space. But that's the most important lesson pretty much I've learned in my time in education. Taught to me by Joey. Always knowing why I'm in the place that I am. And as a counselor, my gosh, that lesson has come back to me over and over again. And how important it is to know why I'm in the place I'm in. Why are you here today? Are you clear about your purpose today? And I hope you take that purpose and refine that purpose throughout your careers. It does change. But grounding myself is always the first thing that helps me. The second thing that helps me is putting in the right frame of mind. So we know when dates happen, directives happen, there's often kind of another thing. Another responsibility for my job. How am I going to see kids if I have to do this? How will this help students? Will it help students? I'm not quite sure. But there's sometimes an immediate kind of, oh my gosh, sense of overwhelm. However, I have learned that expectation drives everything. And the expectation that things will turn out okay really makes a huge difference, even if I have no idea that it will. Sometimes I have to talk myself into that, but I know that expectation makes a difference. There's been some research on expectation that's come out of University of Chicago with kids who believe that they're going to perform well, they actually do. Kids that believe they won't perform well tend not to. Could it be that simple? It is for me, at least. And reminding myself how important it is that I have an expectation that things are going to turn out okay. So when I think about the mandates, I start to breathe, kind of heavy. My heart starts to beat, because the number of them is overwhelming. Many of you have talked about these, you've implemented programs around these, you're in charge of these, you know about them, you may not know about them. Am I supposed to do this? Am I not supposed to do this? But understanding what you're about as a counselor, I believe, gives you a platform to understand what it is you're supposed to be doing. And I believe that's about professional school counselor identity. I don't think I said I was a professional school counselor till maybe about 10 years ago. That's a relatively new title, a new identity. We're not only a small community, we're a pretty young community. Compared to the other helping professions, we're one of the newest. So it makes sense that we're still learning about our identity and what we're about. So let's try that now. I want all of you to say, I'm a professional school counselor.
I'm a professional school counselor.
Even if you're not. For how many of you was that the first time you ever said that as an identity? Some. It is our identity. And owning what that is and understanding what it is helps us be the authorities, the go-to people when it comes to implementing mandates. There's a person that used to go into their backyard every day. There was a slope off their backyard, and it went down to a stream. And every morning, the stream was filled with garbage. And the person took a garbage bag with them every day. And they would get down next to the stream, and they would fish the garbage out of the stream and fill up their garbage bag till it was full. And they would take the garbage and throw it away. Every day this went on. One day this person's child came with them down to the river. It was a river, stream. And the child said, "Where's all this garbage coming from?" Person hadn't really thought about that. They were just worried about getting the garbage out of the stream. And the question was striking. The person said, "I have no idea where the garbage is coming from. Why would you ask a question like that?" And the child said, "I think I want to know. Let's go find out." So they hiked upstream for a while. And when they got pretty far upstream, they found the source. It was a garbage pile, the city dump. And the fence that kept all the garbage in had broken. It split. And so they fixed that up, brought up their magic duct tape with them, fixed the fence, and the garbage didn't flow downstream anymore. I shared this story with you because I think sometimes as counselors, I know it happens to me, I'm so worried about solving the problem that's in front of me that I forget to go upstream and really find out what the source of the issue is. Some of you had the opportunity to hear Dr. Brett Zaromsky in December. He was here for 2 days in Illinois. And Dr. Zaromsky talked about needs assessments and logic models and how to implement interventions, evidence-based decision-making. 2 great days with Brett. But one of the things that he said really struck me, and it was such a simple thing, but it made all the difference in the world for me. He said, don't just do needs assessments and go from there. Because if you do that, you're only going to take the garbage down at the stream at the bottom. He said, what you need to do is take your needs assessment and find out what it means. Go talk to kids. I went, oh, of course. He told a story about a school outside of Cincinnati. They did a needs assessment. The school was 95% economically disadvantaged. They asked the teachers, needs assessment with teachers, what are the issues with the students? They said it's resources. The teacher said the kids don't have enough stuff. They don't have books. They don't have clothes. They don't eat well. That's the problem. The counselors, though, went and talked to kids and said, kids, the teachers kind of believe that you have a resource issue. Kids just said, no, that's not the problem here. Problem is we don't feel very welcome. We're not connecting with people. Wow. And so they implemented intervention around mentoring and connection, not about resources, and their test scores went up. Math and reading improved in the building. But it was the school counselors that went upstream to find out what the issue was. I offer that to you. It was really a mind-blowing concept for me. I know it seems like a simple thing, but I hadn't really thought about it that deliberately. To ask your stakeholders what's really going on. Talk to your students, talk to your parents, talk to your teachers, get multiple different perspectives of what's happening, because then you'll actually know what's occurring and your intervention will be tied to what needs to happen. Same thing around mandates. We need to do this. Well, what's the real problem here? Let's find out what that is and move from there. So once we know where we're going, we have great expectations, we know what we're about, we're professional school counselors. What about the journey? This is a concept a lot of us know. Really, it's about the journey, not the destination. So I'm not going to spend time unpacking that statement. Many of you have done that before. But I thought I'd share with you a couple of concepts that have been really important to me as a counselor. The first one is a word all of you know. Collaboration. But how will you talk about collaboration? Those of you that are going to be interviewing for jobs this spring, raise your hand. Awesome. Applause for all of you. Think about how you're going to talk about collaboration. Be very specific about your training as a professional school counselor and how that contributes to collaboration. What do you do uniquely as a school counselor that adds to collaborative relationships? It's not just about being nice. It is about being an effective collaborator and facilitator with colleagues. And know what role you play in collaborative groups. You might be the leader in collaborative groups. You might be the one that asks the great questions. You might be the one that gets groups unstuck. Know what your role is, be able to talk about that, and what an asset you'll be to collaborative groups in your setting. The next piece, I think we often overlook as counselors. We're trained in consultation. I know it's in every master's program. But I don't hear counselors talk about it intentionally, that this is a skill that they have. So when your principal comes to you and says, I don't know what we're going to do. We've got to put this dating violence program into place. And I'm kind of nervous about it, and I don't know what's going to happen. You got to make it happen. Boy, how does a counselor enter into that conversation? What are some of the emotions that principal's feeling? Scared? Frightened for kids, maybe? Confused? Not even a place to start? How can a counselor enter into that? Empathetic statements. My gosh, you sound really concerned about this. You sound really concerned that maybe we won't be able to get there or implement this. You sound really worried about our students that may be victims of dating violence. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Well, I know something about this as a counselor, and as a consultant, let's work on this together, and we'll come out with a result on the other side. Can you imagine how a principal would respond if you approached it like that? Instead of, oh my gosh, how am I going to get this done? I don't know anything about this program. I have to find out about this. But start as consultant. I have seen cultures change in schools when counselors accepted this identity as consultant. Teachers seek out counselor as consultant. Not to fix a problem. Fix this kid. That's not school counseling. Consultant, how can you help me understand what's going on with this student in the classroom? And then being intentional in that consultation relationship. The next piece I was a little concerned about putting up into my words. Not that I need another C word. But I thought creativity is important. And the reason I paused about putting it in here is I've heard some people say, I'm not creative. I would argue that. I think just the fact that you're here today makes you creative. You're thinking outside the box being here today. You're pushing yourself being here today. That's what creativity is. It's about unpacking that potential that we have and finding this new talent or gift. But if you identify as a person that, I'm not creative, I can't come up with the ideas, what your skill is finding people that do, that have those ideas, and surrounding yourself with those people. That's great consultation work too. You work together as a team in a collaborative way to have a creative result. That's creativity. And so if you identify that way, I challenge. I think there's a continuum of creativity. We all fall somewhere on it. The last piece is consciousness, mindfulness. Being aware of what's happening with me in this time and space as much as I can. My gosh, that's hard. I'm challenged right now in being mindful of what I'm experiencing because I'm thinking about what's coming up next in my mind. But staying grounded in our experience and being aware of what's occurring around us. What's happening with the person sitting next to us? What's happening with my principal or administrator? What's happening with this student that's different than what it was yesterday? Why are those students gathering over in that hallway? Is that an accident or something going on? Do I need to find out about something? Maybe that group of students is my future leaders. I need to find out more about that. Being aware, not being automatic in our experience, but always taking a chance to pause and say, oh, this is what I'm experiencing now. This is what I'm aware of. I think there's other components on how to do your journey. These are the pieces that have been helpful to me. Hopefully, maybe some things have kind of lit a couple ideas in your mind too. Not to spend too much time on this, but because we talked about mandates, I think mandates and programs have a lot in common. We have a mandate, we put a program in. I would argue that programs have beginnings and ends. People that start programs don't like to hear me say that because they put a lot of energy in starting programs. People are passionate about programs, but know that programs have beginnings and ends. So if you know that and recognize that they do, what your challenge is then is about changing culture. And that programs lead to that. In the high school I get to work in, and I work with great people in my high school. That's why I'm here today. The wonderful people I work with, some of which are here today, gives me opportunities to be a part of things like ISCA. The schools that we're a part of, both of our high schools in the district, have had very intentional student leadership initiatives for almost 20 years. To the point now where it's not program-driven, it's culture-driven. When we start programs, they think about student leadership. It's intentional. Again, people have no idea where it started 20 years ago. It's part of our culture, and a wonderful part of our culture as well. Just kind of a simple example of that. However, I do recognize that there's risk in this. And I want to make sure you know that I realize that. Leading initiatives, owning mandates, consulting with your administrator, there's inherent risk. Risk of vulnerability, risk of failure, risk of success, but there is risk. Bill O'Hanlon, the author of Inclusive Therapy, talks about the story of the Tibetan monks. And the story goes something like this. The young initiates who are planning to become monks are offered a deal, basically, by the oldest, wisest Tibetan monks. And the deal is this. You can sign up to be a Tibetan monk, and for 80, 90 years, your whole life, you'll meditate and study, be intentional in your practice, vow of poverty, and maybe you'll reach nirvana. Not guaranteed. The place of all knowingness. Or, behind door number 2, you can go into the cave. Cave is a shortcut. But to get through the cave, you're going to be bombarded by a lot of negative images, negative things, your faults. People will say things to you to try to drag you down. And if you start to listen to them, you'll get lost in the cave. And you will never emerge. Now, most sign on for the 80, 90 years, right? With the possibility of achieving nirvana. I venture to say school counselors were in the cave. We are in the cave. It's about putting one step in front of the next step. Knowing that there's going to be messages of negativity. There's going to be people that say, no, can't do that. Oh, those kids don't have the ability to do that. Those kids will never connect to us. We don't understand those kids. You will hear those messages. But as a school counselor, we know better. That's our identity. We know how people change. We know how to connect and relate. And if there's anything you take away from our time here together this morning, I want to thank you for that time. I really appreciate it. But if there's anything you take away that. That you have the ability to keep one foot in front of the other. Emerge from the cave because you see the possibility of culture change, of changing kids, and connecting with people across their time in your building, and in some ways across their lives. Know that that's our identity. And that's what's unique about professional school counselors and how we can affect change inside our buildings. I encourage you as you go to other sessions today, keep that question out in front of you. What is your identity? How do you identify as a counselor? What are you about? What do you bring to your school? And begin to refine that for yourself so that Monday, when you go back to school, the conference brochure doesn't go on your shelf. It's on your desk. And you go back and go, oh, this is what I'm passionate about. I'm going to go get after this. I want to learn more about this. I'm curious about this. I want you to go back on Monday and be like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Or if you go in your interview, I want you to go and say, oh, I'm so excited to tell you about everything I know about professional school counseling. We need to be excited about this. And I know that you are. As a part of that risk, I'm going to take a little bit of risk now around this idea of emerging from the cave. And during this time, I want you to think about a few pieces. Either the people you met this morning, a couple of things that maybe I said or didn't say, where you can reflect for yourself what Monday's going to look like and how you as a professional school counselor can enter into that world and make a difference for your kids. Amen.